Hey, Strong Ones, and welcome to the show. Today we have Troy Casey. Troy Casey has a very unique approach to health with a very holistic approach with incorporating the health of the individual, but also the health of our planet as well. He has a vast amount of information from all the way from Amazon in studying with the indigenous tribes as a medicine hunter to the Czech certification with Paul Chek. So Troy, welcome to the show. Yeah, yes. There it is.
Yes, thank you for having me on, Anna. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm super excited to have you here. I've been following you on Instagram maybe about a year now, and I really love your approach to what you bring. And one of the things that really kind of like drew me into what you do is the Zen swing. And when I used to water ski, before I would go out and compete, when I was standing on the dock, I would naturally start doing something similar to what you teach as the Zen swing. So we're going to jump right in and have you explain what the Zen swing is.
Yeah, the Zen swing is a very rudimentary Tai Chi move. It's a Tai Chi warm-up. It mobilizes all the tissues. It mobilizes the joints. It lubricates the joints with the synovial fluid and the cerebral spinal fluid. Mm-hmm. It harmonizes the biological oscillators, the mind, the heart, and the gut, or the three brains. Mm. So when you roll up to a plate of food, for example, your mind's not racing with all the business ideas or any stress that you may have, and you're calm and relaxed. Kind of puts you in a Zen state, anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes. And so I liken it to the analogy of like water. Over time, it's an incredible solvent. It will break rocks and create rock formations. And so lubricating the tissues and mobilizing the tissues allows the electrical magnetic frequencies, the electromagnetic energy to run through the meridians, the energy pathways inside the human body. Mm-hmm. And so it really just loosens the body up and then harmonizes, again, the biological oscillators so we can be calm in the face of business or whether we want to eat or relax with our family. And so it's a daily technique and an exercise technique that people can use to de-stress themselves.
Yeah, and for those who are just listening, can you explain what the movement is?
Yes, it's a back and forth movement. Let me see if I can even show this. So basically you stand up with about hips, legs about shoulder distance apart, and you swing 75% of your weight onto one foot and then the other. Eyes are on the horizon, so the twist goes up into the cervical joints. Mm-hmm. So you get movement in all your joints. And you close your eyes, you put your tongue on the roof of the mouth, and that will complete the electrical circuit that goes through your organs as well. And that little breath technique right there will also harmonize the mind. And so very simple nature-based technique. If you do it barefoot in the earth, it'll ground out any kind of electromagnetic pollution. And then if you get some sun in your body, you'll take the energy from the celestial realm and the energy from the earth to harmonize and heal the body.
Cool. Well, thank you for explaining all that. Now, how did you get into more of that holistic approach to health? Have you always been in the health fitness industry and kind of geared more towards that holistic approach? What kind of brought you to this way of healing?
I was in Milan. I was a fashion model many years ago. I was working for Gianni Versace, and I was in Milan and making a career for myself. And I used to have digestive problems, and I would bloat. I'd go out and I'd eat, and the next day I'd have like a food hangover. And I didn't know anything about nutrition. I was in my early 20s at the time, and so I just went down to the bookstore and got books on nutrition and started reading. And I was living in Italy at the time, and they had farmers market everywhere. They were commonplace. Uh-huh. And so I started shopping at farmers markets and really understanding, what real food was. And I started implementing everything that I was reading, and I gained incredible results. And that was 30 years ago. And it's just been a progression ever since. And as I started to wake up and heal myself, I started going deeper and deeper, and I got into meditation, I got into yoga, and these healed my nervous system. I think we all have, trauma patterns and things that we've grown up with. And this was able to calm my nervous system, help me be more clear and more focused. And then I started working with Maori indigenous healers and to release some of the trauma stored in my body. And I not only witnessed many miracles working with them for the last 22 years, but I had my own miracles. And so, and right around that time, I was practicing a lot of Vipassana meditation, studying with S.N. Goenka, sitting 10-day courses of meditation in silence. That also healed my nervous system. And then I started working with an herbal company in the Amazon. And I had been studying herbs for about 20 years previous to that. And I started putting the herbs into my body, and they woke my consciousness up to a whole different level, putting those vital, powerful plants grown in virgin soil, some of the strongest plants on the earth, to harmonize the hormones. It really just lit up my consciousness. I felt very awakened. And then I started researching the plants and going down to the Amazon, and I started drinking the magical brew ayahuasca with the shamans as well. And that was another level of my awakening. I had 3 very powerful visions when I was in the Amazon, and they've been unfolding ever since.
Interesting. Do you think it's just because of the consciousness and the level that you were able to gain from the herbs with those insight or visions?
Can you rephrase that question?
Is it because of how you awaken, you're able to get those visions?
Well, I definitely think that there's a progression to awareness and understanding and developing your own consciousness. And I definitely went through various stages, and I think each stage prepped me for the next, for sure. And the visions were very clear. And for the last 13 years or so, I've saw them unfold. And I think if I didn't do the prep work before, or had the difficulties and challenges and stresses in my life, I think those were instigators for my own awakening. And so I think there's no mistakes. And I think it was just a progression, a natural progression, if you will.
When you saw your visions, were you almost terrified or excited? And then how has it been with the fact that they've been coming true for you?
Well, I think the most terrifying visions are what we're living right now. So we've got, ecocide or ecological disaster happening on the planet. I was working in the Amazon at the time, and I saw mountains of sawdust. We heard the stories of deforestation from the major industries, etc. And so living and working in the Amazon, I could feel the pulse of the planet. And I realized that I had a greater responsibility. It's not just about me. If I don't get my act together and start advocating for change and transformation on this planet, the systems that we have are unsustainable. And so, and that's clear. And I think I'm not the only one to say that. And so, huge transformation is coming. I've seen the vision, and currently what we're doing is unsustainable. We've got 5% of the population creating 30% of the pollution and using, another 25 to 30% of the natural resources on the planet. And that's just simply unsustainable. We can't export that model.
Right.
And so I took that vision and my understanding and went out and communicated that to as many people as I could. And when I came out of the jungle, YouTube was a brand new reality. And I started posting my footage in the Amazon.
Okay.
And instantly got notoriety because I don't think there was too many people doing that at the time. And people were inspired by the Amazon. And at the same time, they're too busy to really pay attention to that because they got to get to work. Maybe they're not good food. They don't have the capacity to think beyond their own survival. So,
I'm totally going to change gears since your daughter hopped in on this. You talk a lot about the spirituality of our health. And you mentioned, I believe, in one of your posts of how children have been a spiritual teacher for you. How has your daughter moved or changed you in a way as a father?
Well, in many ways, I mean, it's a huge responsibility to have children in this day and age. And, being so in love with your children and understanding, I think a real man really understands the environment that one lives in and knows the external threats, the predators and the elements in there that have the potential to destroy your long-term health, your genetic expression. And so when my body, or spiritual spacesuit, as I like to call it, goes back into the ground, I will still have these guys on this planet. And the question is will the planet be inhabitable? And when I was working in the Amazon, I mean, we were on the fast track to, complete destruction. And so I've watched a lot. I've kept my ear to the grindstone on geopolitics and really watched what's happening. And luckily, the futurists are in alignment with my vision and my solutions for the future. I think we're moving towards a world beyond oil and beyond fiat currencies or money iteration as we know it. So it's good to see other people talking about this and ushering in the next level of consciousness. Peter Diamandis runs Singularity University, and they're already talking about a post-capitalistic world in the next 12 years. And so I don't know how all that's going to shake out, but I have seen the vision. Glory for humanity is coming onto this planet, and we will create sustainable structures and sustainable systems for the future. And I see that unfolding. Things are changing at a fast rate, even though it's darkest before dawn, I like to say.
Yeah. You mentioned how you felt like the pulse of the earth when you're in the Amazon. And there's been times in my life where I have felt like a pulse either from a situation or an event or a pulse from another human being. What are some ways that you can just like guidelines or anything like that to help the listener understand this pulse or be aware of this universal pulse?
Well, all knowledge is knowledge of self. And all the ancient sages have said, walk the middle path and know thyself. And so understanding yourself and understanding your connection to the earth, to others. We're in symbiotic relationship with the earth, with each other. And so it's a good idea to recognize that and then start gravitating towards your own ideas or systems that can help balance that out and create sustainability for life on earth. I know that's pretty big picture for most people. So what I recommend is people take care of their own ecosystem. They take care of what's going on inside of them. We carry our soil, or it's been said, the analogy is we carry our soil in our gut. And what's happening? 70% of the American people are obese or overweight right now. Gut issues are across the board. People write me every day for that. And what's happening with our soil? So we've used commercial farming and harsh toxic compounds on the soil for many years, and it's killed the the microflora in the soil, and then that's translating into us. The gut microbiome, I think, is about 10 years old, and it's the cutting edge of science right now. It's our second brain. We have brain material, the ganglia, that goes through our vagus nerve, through our heart, and into our gut. And so, and I like to use the phrase, mind is an embodied process. So if you want to look at your results, or the sum total of your results, just look in the mirror. That's your body, mind, and consciousness staring right back at you. Mm-hmm. So optimizing your own ecosystem, your own environment, is a direct translation to the world. How do we expect the world to be healthy if we're not healthy ourselves? Mm-hmm. Gandhi said, become the change that you wish to see in the world. So that's the jump off point, is really harmonizing your own biology, physiology, and psychology in the world we live in. And then, utilizing the gift that we've been given, the gifts from the Creator, then we can affect change with our own consciousness, power, understanding, our own intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so it's up to us to make the difference in the world. We all complain about the politicians. So, all right, that system is, I don't like to keep it in the conspiracy realm, although I think there's some conspiracy elements to it. The fact of the matter is we're all responsible. We're all in direct relationship with the environment. So it's up to us to really make that difference. And as far as conspiracy goes, it's just good. It's just business. And we live in a capitalistic world, which is actually crony capitalism, if you look at government subsidies for industry, et cetera. And that's a form of socialism. So socialism is already here. Yep. So I postulate the two major solutions that are required are to evolve consciousness, or raise human consciousness and change all systems. And so, it's time to rethink oil and rethink money in the current iterations, rethink energy. And so fossil fuels are obviously polluting the world. We have many geopolitical wars to go extract natural resources from areas that have them. I think the Middle East is a prime example. Syria, Libya, these are all crimes against humanity. And what was the reason? Strategic reason to get those natural resources out of the earth so that we can utilize them for our economy. So it's just time to rethink what we're doing on this planet. Yeah. And innovators and thought leaders have always done this. And it's not that I'm the only one thinking about this. There's many people who are thinking about it. But remember, if you watch a movie like Who Killed the Electric Car, there are huge industries with people making lots of money and have power in those industries that are holding those industries in place. And if you know the history of innovation and invention, people have always come up with better ideas, and that's rocked the establishment. And we're up for massive change. Everything needs to be rethought, from agriculture to medicine to education to commerce, geopolitics, energy especially. And so, our medical industry is failing us right now. Many people are addicted to opiates, synthetic opiates. Lots of people are living with pain. They're living with inflammation. And look no further. The father of modern day medicine said, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food." And so that's the father of modern day medicine, Hippocrates. And people have to take the Hippocratic oath, which first states do no harm. But if you know anything about pharmaceutical drugs, they have side effects. And side effects is a marketing term. It's really a marketing gimmick. There are direct effects. Cause and effect is a natural law. And so when you put toxic compounds into the body, there are effects on the body, and you only need to look as far as the inserts in these drug manufacturing labels to know the side effects. And so it just comes down to I would say misguided understanding of how things work. And that misguided understanding really comes from business. So it's been good for, business, for certain businesses, but it hasn't been too beneficial for the average person, because 70% of the American people are obese or overweight, 33% have diabetes, chronic fatigue, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. All these things are huge. And now all the new ones, the autoimmune, which I directly relates to the gut, in my humble opinion. If you're constantly poisoning yourself, then there's going to be an immune response, and then the immune system gets lowered, overtaxed, and then that opens you up for infections from parasites, microbes, bacteria, viruses, and fungus. And so this is the way I see things in the world today. And look no further than our statistics.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned about new energy and new money. And one of the things I'm always, or something that I say is like, what is our health, or what is money if we don't have the health of our planet? So what do you, like, where does your mind go with this concept of a form of new money?
So my 4 major solutions that I've come up with communicating these messages for the last 12 or 13 years is my mission is to raise human consciousness and change all systems. My vision is clean air, water, soil, and equitable systems for all mankind in my lifetime. My 4 major solutions are hashtag free energy, hashtag gift economy, hashtag self-care education, and permaculture. So food is free. We drop a seed in the ground and it fruits. Yes, currently in our situation, it costs money to bring it to market, but we also throw out exact amount of food that we manufacture a year. And there's 1 in 4 children in Los Angeles County that are food challenged or starving. And so look no further than the system we have set up. Even in the health food stores, they still throw food away because doesn't look good on the shelves, and it needs to look good for a premium price that they pay. And then what's the trucking and the shipping and the storage that is utilized for this type of food production? And so permaculture, something that's a little bit more locally sourced. I know that there's a history. I think there was some Indians in the desert that were growing watermelons out of sand. And so we can cultivate the soil, and we can use permaculture techniques to optimize our output. And there's been a lot of research on the British Soil Association. I think the American military did research as well, that the organics outperform commercial. That's been proven, but the industry will come in and say otherwise, like they're feeding the world's population, or they're saving the world through feeding them, these frankenfoods, genetically engineered crops. But clearly the results differ, because you're not feeding people, you're poisoning people if 70% of the American people are obese or overweight. Yeah.
I'm curious. I used to be a subscriber for what's called Imperfect Food, and they would send food that wouldn't get classified to go into the supermarkets just based on the look, the exterior look of it, and it didn't go through certain criterias to get into the supermarket. And when I first found out about that, I was like, are you for real? We live in such a place of even just appearance satisfaction, even with the food that we buy. I'm curious, what changed for you? Because I know you were in the modeling industry. What kind of changed that aspect for you of that appearance to true health for yourself, and then also just for our economy?
Well, I'm still into aesthetics. I think that beauty has an important aspect, and beauty, I think, is represented with symmetry.
Right.
And so I still have the aspects of aesthetics. I think it's important for me, especially my home and the environment that I live in. Beauty plays a factor on that. But when it comes to food, you want something that's edible. And something that's maybe looks perfect, that's propped up by preservatives, or some type of farming methods that make the vegetables larger or the animals larger. Mm. That doesn't translate into a natural form of health. And the body requires natural food. It has a direct biochemical match to you. Mm-hmm. Frankenfoods are stored in the body with a lipid structure around that, because the biocomputer is intelligent and it doesn't know what to do with these random linear inputs that are supposedly safe scientifically. Mm-hmm. And so, that's why I believe that, obese people are starving. They desire nutrition, deep nutrition. There isn't any in the food that they're eating, so they continue to poison themselves. And then the body's intelligence, it says, I don't know how to deal with this stuff, so we'll just deal with it later. And so that's where I see the morbidly obesity coming in. I see that people are eating mutated foods and they're turning into mutants. So aesthetics, in food, the body requires nutritious food. That's the bottom line. And, let's just take the apple, for example. The apples used to be very small, and now they're these big sugar bombs. And that comes from hybridization. And so trying to get back to the natural nutrition as much as possible, I have pulled it off in my body. I believe that at 53 years old, I have some form of health application of these principles applied, and it shows up in my biology, in my physiology, and in my psychology. Mm-hmm. So, natural food, in my humble opinion, has ballast in my life. I see it playing out.
Yeah.
People ask for any, scientific proof. Well, my human body laboratory is my proof.
Right.
And utilizing my own intuition and common sense. How about that? Mm-hmm. People aren't even using common sense anymore. Again, go back to the father of modern day medicine. Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food. So anything that's edible, herbs, roots, barks, berries, greens, even our food supply is still commercialized and domesticated at one level or another. We used to have fasting built into our natural environment. When the food wasn't available, we would go into a fasting state in our body. And lots of research around longevity and fasting and calorie restriction is a great way to optimize the human biology and physiology. So
going back to kind of what you were saying of just the common sense, do you think we live in a society that's so scientifically based or research based that we lose that common sense or that intuition to know what is right for our own being and what is right for our health and healing?
Absolutely. Again, let's just go back to our statistics. 70% of the American people are obese or overweight. 33% has diabetes. So people have subjugated, they have allowed these ideas to come into their consciousness, and they have given up their power, their understanding, their divinity, their innate intelligence, their intuition for this idea of scientific fact. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is most ideas in science get overturned within 10 years, even Nobel Prizes, because more information comes back online. And so science is an ever-evolving methodology of observation. And so we get better at it as we get more information, or we get the electron microscope or the Hubble telescope, etc. We can see beyond that. So it's not the greatest idea to become too fixed on ideas. I think it's a good idea for people to study natural law, the Hermetic Code, the Egyptian mystery schools, the law of correspondence, as above, so below, the law of mentalism, the law of cause and effect. These things all have a play on our experience in planet Earth. Those are axioms that aren't really going away anytime ever. And so it's better to pay attention to that instead of science, or what I call scientism. People give up their power in order for belief systems, and you can skew data and create research bias and quote unquote science on saying basically anything. So, and it's a good idea to also recognize that there's two forces on this planet. There's yin, yang, and there's masculine, feminine, exhalation, inhalation, anabolic, catabolic. And so there's always a light side to the dark side. And so we have to understand this and work towards balance.
I love what you just said of how people give up their power, their intuition for the scientific stats or research. My question goes to more of, first off, my question is, what is your spiritual belief?
Well, first of all, I try not to have, too many rigid beliefs.
Yeah.
Period, because my consciousness is always expanding, and my understanding is expanding. So I believe that everything's spiritual, and I believe everything in our way is designed for our own awakening to just higher levels of consciousness and awareness. So beliefs around spirituality, it seems to me this whole experience is spiritual. We come from the spirit realm. But yeah, I try not to adhere to too many hard and fast rules around it, except for being aware and awake in every given moment at the highest capacity that I can. And usually trauma or some types of difficulty are catalysts in awakening.
Yeah. I agree with that completely. Do you think people stay in a place of comfort or the known and staying almost stuck versus like improving their health in the unknown?
Absolutely. I think you're seeing that playing out today, especially in the United States of America. People are lost, and between the programming from the news media, including news reports that grains are good for you, and Kellogg's and General Mills did also all this research on grains early on and created these commodities. And I believe, the perfect example is that we've been poisoned. And you add to that toxic compounds, et cetera. And so people think they're eating food, but they can only look in the mirror and see that they're poisoning themselves. So yes, the common sense has been completely subjugated and given up for an external power, the all-knowing corporations, or the all-knowing mainstream media and news programs, and the all-knowing scientists. My mentor likes to say that the scientists are the prostitutes of the modern era. So they're open for hire to basically, skew data and say what's needed to say as a marketing ploy to sell products and services, but mainly products known as food products.
Yeah. Going back to more of like the spiritual aspect of this, you posted, I don't know when you posted this, end of March. The greatest gift in the world is the ability to help others see past the illusion and recognize the divinity within. How would you define divinity? Is that just energy, pure energy in our health, or?
I would say the awareness to the connection to the all.
And what is the all?
Everything in the living universe, in your living experience. There's a web of life, the morphogenetic field, the holographic universe. We're all connected to everything, all time, space, past, present, future, each other. I think Einstein was on to a bunch of this stuff as well. The brain is both a receiver and a transmitter. And I think the military did some research on And I think it was depicted in the film Men That Stare at Goats. And they did research on all this paranormal information. And there was also a book, The Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. I think it was from the 1800s. They sent a bunch of scientists and intelligence operatives over to India and the Himalayas to study these masters that were reported that could stop their heart, or they can travel from one space to another. And so people can read that book to really understand it. They sent over many, skepticists, and again, high-level scientists and researchers. And I do believe the story goes like 11 out of the 12 people that went over there stayed in India to study with the masters of the Far East.
What was the book again?
The Teachings of the Masters of the Far East.
Okay.
You can get it on YouTube for free.
I'm just writing it down. With that, I know, again, going off of some of the things that you posted on Instagram, one of the things that kind of got my attention was recently, I believe you hosted like maybe a healing workshop or something like that, and you were beating a drum, and the individual was just laying there and just had this huge vibration from the drum. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the importance of that vibration and the healing energy with that type of shaking?
Yeah. Well, there was a couple of things that happened. I do shaking as an exercise technique to kind of shake the tissues loose.
Mm-hmm.
And, the mind stores tension in the body. And lots of times, a lot of the thoughts in our own mind are not ours. They're programmed through the media. They come through the Wi-Fi signals, the radio signals, other people's thoughts, other people's wishes. Parents wish that we become a doctor or a lawyer, or, I live in LA. There's a lot of actors here, and parents don't like that. What happens if you fail? Blah, blah, blah. And so we have all this programming inside of us, and that limits our ideas and limits us from moving forward intuitively. And so it's a good idea to become clear of that, in my humble opinion, and listen to your heart and go after, what you desire instead of what other people are trying to program into you.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer your question?
Kind of. So does the shaking and that kind of loosening up the body help get rid of that programming?
Yes, because if it stores in your tissues, it will calcify your tissues. You'll get, neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain, and the body stores, stress and trauma. The mind stores stress and trauma in the body, and it will go to the weakest places where we've had trauma in the past, or if we've got low-level musculoskeletal excitation, we're wearing the weight of the world is on our shoulders. We have worry, doubt, debt. All these things can, give us neck pain. We can start breathing into our panic receptors in our neck, and everything gets shut down, and it gets exacerbated, it gets worse, and you start eating food, et cetera, that doesn't belong in the body. This creates tension. And so I get people in moving the body, movement as medicine. And so exercise is a necessity, not a luxury. And so in my methodology is to get the electrical impedances out of the body, because we have this energy flowing through us at all times, and we have 5 meridians in the body, and energy flows through those meridians. And so the more that we can loosen up our tissues, the more the ideas can flow through us. And also divine providence, right? We are all connected to the all, the God, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And through our heart and our gut, we can get the intuition that inspires us, our internal guidance, our innate intelligence, our the wisdom that resides inside of us. And so shaking that off can help get that energy flowing better.
Right.
What's going on with the person on my social media channel is she was going through a healing process.
Uh-huh.
So she was suffering from depression and suicidal thoughts, and I think she lost her husband, and they had some other issues that were going on, some deeper seated issues, and so she had all this tension stored in her body, and it wanted to be released. I don't think she was ready to release it at that time. So
yeah, going off of that, of just when people aren't ready to release in their own journey of letting go has been something kind of been big for April for me and for some of my clients. I don't even know how to turn this into a question, but when is it a time where there maybe you're not ready to let it go, but it's necessary to let it go? Do you understand what I'm saying with that? Like, this is going to be very detrimental to you if you don't have that cathartic release or that mental aspect of letting it go to move forward.
Yeah, I think trauma and pain and all these things are an indicator for us to wake up, and we can rise to the occasion, or we can also play the victim, and I think Carolyn Mice calls it the healing currency of injury. Sometimes we get more attention being injured, right? You see this with high performance athletes. Maybe they have multi-million-dollar contracts, and the team, they are supporting the whole team, and there's a lot of pressure on them. They get injured, they get different levels of attention, and the pressure goes off of them. And so sometimes people can carry that injury with them. And so there's that. And we also don't have a lot of these tools to assess and ground into our own healing. We don't give ourselves enough quiet time to even understand that there's imbalances. And we are all knowing self-healing mechanisms. The question is the pain teacher is always guiding us. The question is, are we listening? So some people aren't ready to listen. They have more learning experiences as well. I think that there's no mistakes, and sometimes it's got to get more loud for us to wake up. And I just believe that any illness that we have is our own spiritual contract for our own awakening.
Just from my own story, and the listeners know I've dealt with numerous injuries, and I find it interesting. I was home this past weekend, and an injury kind of flared up, and I don't know, for me, this week has been I took this weekend off, and I was like, is this just the fact that I allowed some of this past trauma to re-traumatize me, or did I just not stay true to my health and stay grounded within my own being, to not allow the injury to reoccur? So my question goes to, how aware do you need to be to know this event or this conversation or these people may trigger me and this injury may flare back up, to stay true to my body? Or does that just kind of happen? Do you know what I'm saying with that? Kind of.
So, yeah. These could all just be, on the esoteric side, spiritual reminders to keep us on our path. So, speaking from my own injuries, I had black mold poisoning and I had subsequent autoimmune issues.
Oh, wow.
And so very similar to Lyme's disease or MS, I had chronic fatigue. I had neurological issues in my legs. Weird stuff happening, arthritis that would move from joint to joint. So there's basic foundation principles of what it takes to be a healthy human being. And once we get on the train of healing, then we have flare-ups. This is always going to guide us back to what's most important. I postulate, and my research shows, that the number one ways to heal the human body are sleep and fasting. And so if we get spun out or we get caught up in the modern world, and the stressors rise again, it's just another indication to go back to the basics. So what are the basics? Movement and nutrition is medicine for sure. You need hydration, nutrition, sleep, movement, proper breathing techniques, repatterning the diaphragm, making sure that you are breathing from the belly as opposed to the neck. And then, can you go in there, please? Thank you. And so, so going back to the basics when we get lost, because the potential for injury is always there. The potential for low energy is always there. So always taking time to go within. If we're not feeling, right, or we're not happy, then it's time to get quiet. So that Dr. Quiet is in the domain of sleep, rest, contemplation, meditation, prayer. These things re-energize, reharmonize us. And then from there, we have a place to respond. And so, but first we have to take care of ourselves first. And people will get more mileage managing and mitigating and understanding and assessing their stress levels, where it's coming from. So if that's stressful people, stressful places, stressful foods, stress can come, there's 7 major factors of stress, including digital communications. And so these things all have to be understood, managed, and mitigated with awareness. Again, as men, as human beings, we know the stressors on the environment. We know where the predators are. We know what may be affecting our long-term survival. And so then we go back to basics. We go back to rest, relaxation, really feeding. That's how you feed the soul. Get quiet. And from there, all the answers will come. We know what to do.
Yeah. Well, my question goes to, do you think most people don't want to or negate that because they don't want to hear their own intuition? And you mentioned like the concept of like, once you get quiet, then it's time to respond, of like taking action and taking responsibility for moving into a better self for the future.
Yeah, I mean, look, the culture's not set up to heal yourself. The culture's set up to hustle and grind. I'll sleep when I'm in the grave. Buying trinkets and other things that makes you look cool on Instagram, and, not investing in your health. People will purchase a Ferrari and run high performance gasoline in it and high performance fuel. They'll change the oil, they'll wax it, they'll wash it, they'll garage it, they'll take care of it. But they won't do the same thing for their body. They'll read their owner's manual, but there is no real owner's manual for being a human being, except for the one I'm creating. And there's other people out there that are doing the same thing. You're doing the same type of work. You're setting up a blueprint for healing. You're setting up a way to heal the human body. And so the bottom line is people have to go through the pain enough to wake up and see if there's a better way. Find a person like yourself and start studying the basic principles of healing the human body. The information is out there, but again, a lot of people are looking for scientific proof. A lot of the methodologies that I use come from the ancient 5,000-year practices of yoga and Taoism, or basic fundamental principles. And so the healing is available. Why do people not seek it? Well, again, they've given up their power for the scientists, the scientism, and then they figure if they get sick, and most people are asymptomatic, they're not necessarily well or healthy. If they get sick, they go to a medical doctor to fix them. And their solutions are cut, burn, and poison. But we all know that those aren't holistic solutions. So it's out there. Why don't people change? I think that they've been programmed by design, and we can't play the victim at all. So I believe this is similar to what I understand about the Vedic scriptures, where God talks about the big cosmic joke. This is God just forgetting and waking up and remembering, right? We've lost our way. Mm-hmm. And so this is just another tool, spiritual fodder for our own awakening is what I postulate. Otherwise, we're all just a bunch of victims.
Do you think it's based off of fear somehow? Like fear of the unknown or fear of their own power?
Yes. Well, I mean, Marianne Williamson says that perfectly. And so she said that, what is it?
Yeah, I know the quote you're referring to.
What is it? Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God.
Yeah.
That's totally in my philosophy.
Yeah. And I think just from my own upbringing and my story of healing, I think I've learned that I feared men, or just the common, like, what does the world think of me, versus really embracing that light from the divine to shine through me.
Yes.
And I think that's the biggest, at least that's the transition I'm in right now. And I think that's where I think our society has really trumped this power or this sense of control or security, because the unknown power to work within ourselves is something beyond we could ever imagine or comprehend. And I think that's the biggest thing where we, I guess it goes into this concept of surrender and this aspect of letting go, of like to be moved and to be led by this power that may not be able to be comprehend within our own human language.
Yeah, we appeal to authority.
Yeah.
We're programmed. I mean, look, people only need to look no further than The Century of Self. It was a BBC documentary on Edward Bernays, who is Freud's nephew. So he took all that psychological mastery from Freud and wove that into a business structure called public relations. And this was in the early 20th century. And basically, for the last 100 or so years, we've been programmed through commercials, whether economically or politically. And so, and then you tack on top of that the educational system that doesn't tell us how to take care of our human body, and the medical industry that says, if you need to be healthy, you need to go see a state licensed doctor. And so we give up our power. We give up our power for the media. Hey, if it's on the news, it must be right. Right? It comes from scientists. It must be right. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how to observe that. And so it must be right. Let me listen to those guys. And, I'm constantly contacted, people are so lost on nutrition. Well, what about this? And what about that? And this person says this, and this person says that. And so the bottom line is the body requires natural elements to rebuild its eyeballs, spinal cord. We replicate our, trillions of cells every 7 years. We replicate them completely every 7 years, but we're replicating them all the time, depending on the nutrition that you're feeding the body and the toxicity in the environment.
I found when I was in college for my degree in exercise science, I watched this documentary, and I wish I knew what it was, but it was all about how this one person got lost out at sea and how he was able to catch a fish. And he just knew intuitively that he needed to eat the eye of the fish, or he needed to eat a certain part of the fish. But it was like those sources from the fish, that's what needed to heal, or what his body needed at the time for nutrients. And I thought it was so fascinating. because he just let the body lead what he needed.
Well, and he had no external inputs
Yeah.
except for the environment. So he was living in the environment with no one else impressing on his ideas. He had to figure it out for himself.
Yeah. I'm at the library right now and I'm getting kicked out of my study room. So we're going to wrap it up. But do you have any advice on how to live from that place with the external life that we live in with social media, the news and that type of stuff, and staying true to ourselves and listening to our intuition?
Well, to ask yourself what you want. You know, what's your dream? What's your purpose? What's your legacy? What do you want? Whatever you want, you need a healthy body and mind to achieve it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my advice is figure out what your dream is, what your legacy is, what your purpose is, what your best friend will say at your eulogy. What is the life that you've lived? And then live by design instead of living by default. You're programmed at least 12 years in the educational system, and that makes you a good employee. So deprogram your mind and start coming from a place of what you desire. And getting healthy is usually the first step, and that's a journey within itself.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Troy. I got to get going because people are knocking at my door to get out of here. So, but you had incredible knowledge and wisdom. I look forward to meeting you in person someday. And thank you so much. Strong Winds, for those who are listening, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you share it out with your family and friends. And don't forget the 5 stars and review. Other than that, I will be back next week.